Finding an apartment can be very stressful. And I know for me, back in February of 2023, I had to scramble to find something that was affordable and within a 1 month, 2 month span. In this video, I want to share with you how you can find an affordable apartment, but also find an apartment within a reasonable amount of time. These 5 tips that I'm going to share with you are 5 things I actually used in order to find the apartment that my wife and I are currently in now. I want to preface though and say that even though this doesn't take a lot of time, it probably will take a good amount of work to put in. So number 1, figure out your budget. This was the first thing that Kat and I wanted to do when we were initially apartment searching. We wanted to balance, of course, the amenities of the apartment, but also the cleanliness and the look of the apartment, but at the same time, making sure that it was within a reasonable price point, because I was in college and had a part-time job, and Kat had a full-time... Kat, you had a full-time job, right? She had a full-time job, but not like a corporate salary job. Kat and I were trying to shoot for the 25% of our monthly income range for what the rent would cost at the apartment. I think when we first got this apartment that we're at, the rent was more than 25%, but then after I graduated college, got a full-time job, the rent fell more into that 25% range. I think the benefit of this is that if your rent is taking up so much of your paycheck, you don't have a lot of your paycheck to use for other things, whether that's like for us getting out of debt or having enough money for food, groceries, everything else that you want to do. The second tip is that you really want to try to keep your options open. The apartment that we're in now, I found through an email ad. I got one of those things in Gmail where it's like the promotions tab. It was an ad for this specific complex, and I didn't want to click on the ad because I was nervous it was a scam. But I opened up a separate browser, typed in the apartment complex, looked into it, did the rest of the research, and we toured and found this place. Something else that we would do is that as we were driving, if we'd find an apartment that we liked, we would write it down in our notes app. We'd write it down so that later we could go back, research it, look into it, and see what this apartment was. I also used just a generic Google search to figure out like apartments near Tampa or apartments in Tampa that are within a certain amount of price range. And there were websites like, I think apartments.com. I don't really remember the other websites, but there were some other websites that I looked on to see what was in the area. This third thing is if you really want an affordable rent, considering getting some roommates is probably something you should look into. The apartment I was at before, I lived with 2 other guys, and I was fortunate enough to have my parents pay for the rent, but the rent price at that place was significantly cheaper because there was 3 of us versus the apartment that we have now or just rent at other places. It also helped that we were living in a house, and I think typically if you rent at a house, sometimes those monthly rent prices are a little bit lower than an apartment complex. If you need to look for roommates, one place that you can look is in Facebook groups. I know in Tampa there were specific Facebook groups that if you were looking for someone to sublease, if you were a college student looking for roommates to live in the dorms, you could use that Facebook group to find them there. When I was looking for the current apartment that we're in now, we had to move in while I was still a tenant and still had a lease at another place. The Facebook group was good for that, but I didn't really check that. I missed out on a specific section in the Facebook group that I had requests, but didn't realize. I should have looked more into that, but I eventually found somebody through one of the guys that I was living with at the time. This next tip maybe should have gone at the beginning, but it's just to get organized. I know for me, I used a spreadsheet, an Excel sheet, to list out every apartment that we looked at and everything that was important when looking at the apartment. So we had the price of rent, we had the amenities, we had the pet policy, the cost of utilities, and just trying to get clear on all the information so that you can compare them side by side and really determine, all right, this is the direction, this is the apartment we want to go for, and these other ones we can get rid of. This next tip is something we did but didn't do a lot of, but looking back, I realized that this was really good to do for us. We actually toured a couple of the complexes that we were looking at, and this was really good because as uncomfortable as it was, this was the time to really ask the questions that you need to ask and get clarity on, because sometimes the websites don't include everything. So being able to go to the actual complex, find somebody who can give you a tour, and then ask them questions like, hey, are there rats in this complex? Or what's the pest control like? Because some places are better than others, and you want to make sure that you know that information because they may not really advertise that on the website. Something to watch out for as you're touring these apartments is that you want to be careful not to fall into the pressure that they put on, because I know for me, and Kat can probably attest to this, there was an apartment that I toured by myself, and I was like, man, this apartment's really nice, like this is the one we want. And then Kat came back for a tour and realizing now in the apartment that we're in, we were like, yeah, that one was not great. But while we were there, they were like, you can sign today, we can get your name down, we can do this. And I'm like, I mean, that looks pretty good to me. And especially now with my commute to work, I'm like, man, if we had chosen that apartment complex, which was 30 minutes further east of us, and I have to go west for work, that would have added an extra 30 minutes to my commute, if not more. We actually signed, I think, either the day after we toured or that day, because of all the research that we had done prior. We knew exactly, like, this is the rent range that we're shooting for. So when we toured this place and we saw how nice it was, but also that it fit within our budget, we were like, all right, like, let's just seal the deal. Like, we're confident in the decision we're making. There was a quote I heard that was really helpful in this process, but also I think another process in general. It was that the person who has the most information in front of you and the most patience, really, ultimately will be successful. When you're not patient and don't have all the facts and all the information, it's easy to make a decision that you'll later regret, or make a decision that's not the best decision. Hey, Kat.
Yeah?
Is there anything else that you'd add?
To what?
To this. Get some more insight from my lady.
I wasn't listening.
Oh, man. My goal in these videos is to help you navigate your 20s, so join me on the video that's on your screen now so we can continue figuring this all out together.